Gopi Jana Palapa Giri Bharatari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharatari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharatari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gornitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning in our Srimad Bhagavatam class, it is the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev, but we're proceeding with the regular Bhagavatam class. It is text 41 and text 42 from chapter 74 in the 10th canto. So we'll be chanting text 41 together. Tata Pandu Sutaha Krudha Matsya Kaikaya Srinjayaha Udayudha Samutastu Shishupala Jikan Sabaha Tata Pandu Sudha Krudha Matsya Kaikaya Srinjaya Udayudha Samutastu Shishupala Jikam Sabaha Tata Pandu Sutta Krudha Matsya Kaikaya Srinjaya Udayudha Samutastu Shishupala Jikam Sabaha. Please chant. Tata Pandu Sutta Krudha Matsya Kaikaya Srinjaya Udayudha Samutastu Shishupala Jikam Sabha. Tata Pandu Sutta Krudha Matsya Kaikaya Srinjaya Udayudha Samutastu Shishupala Jikam Sabha. Tata Pandu Sutta Krudha Matsya Kaikaya Srinjaya Udayudha Samutastu Shishupala Jikam Sabha. The word for word. Tata, then Pandu Sutta, the sons of Pandu, Krudha, angered, Matsya Kaikaya Srinjaya, the Matsyas, Kaikayas, and Srinjayas, Ut Ayudha, holding up their weapons, Samutastu, stood, Shishupala Jigam Sava, desiring to kill Shishupal. And the translation is by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Then the sons of Pandu became furious, and together with the warriors of the Matsya, Kaikaya, and Srinjaya clans, they rose up from their seats with weapons poised, ready to kill Shishupal. There's no purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And text 42. Tatash chaidyas tvasam branto don't need to chant. Jagre kajya karmani vatsayam Krishna pakshiyan rajna sadasi bharatam. And the translation for text 42. Undaunted, Shishupal then took up his sword and shield in the midst of all the assembled kings, O Bharata, and hurled insults at those who sided with Lord Krishna. So no purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svam Rupa Kadamayan Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Prabhupada Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There is, however, a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on text 41, and he rephrases the particular occurrence. So I'll just read the translation from the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Then the sons of Pandu became furious, and together with the warriors of the Matsya, Kakaya, and Srinjaya clans, they rose up from their seats with weapons poised, ready to kill Shishupal. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment is the following. The sons of Pandu, headed by Bhima, became very angry and suddenly sprang to their feet. That's his commentary. So, and in a similar way, Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, describing this particular moment. This is Srila Prabhupada's writing. All the kings present belonging to the Kuru dynasty and Srinjaya dynasty were very angry and immediately took up their swords and shields to kill Shishupal, who was so foolish that he was not even slightly agitated, although all the kings present were ready to kill him. Shishupal did not care to think of the pros and cons of his foolish talking, and instead of stopping, when he saw the kings were ready to kill him, he stood to fight with them and took up his sword and shield. So the sons of Pandu, of course Yudhisthira is one of them, but we'll take it that it's Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev, who one could say, just looking at them objectively, they would certainly fall into the category of those who are living entities who are seeing from the point of view of the revealed scriptures. So that would be just an objective statement about them. So this kind of view, looking from the revealed scriptures, is described in this way. And this is coming from Mantra 7 of Sri Ishopanishad, how persons looking through the eyes of revealed scriptures are seeing. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. So, where is there illusion or anxiety for him? That's the question. So that's Mantra 7 in Sri Ishopanishad. And one could say that certainly the Pandava brothers, they certainly fall into this category, that they are seeing all living entities as spiritual sparks. So, the question is asked, what anxiety could they possibly have? So even though they've seen Shishupal functioning in this kind of way. Now, Srila Prabhupada, he breaks down this view of more advanced devotees, such as the Majjhima Adhikaris. And this is what he says. They're following 4 principles. So this is in the devotional path, a kind of more advanced stage. 4 principles are being followed. One is that personality being on that level of devotional life, he sees the Supreme Lord. Secondly, he sees the devotees of the Supreme Lord. Third, he sees the innocent who have no knowledge of the Lord. And the 4th principle, that persons on that level in their devotional life, they understand that there are atheists who have no faith in the Lord and who hate those in the devotional line. So somebody even on the intermediate level in the devotional life, they're actually able to recognize these different categories, and they're able to understand, where somebody is in their position in relation to the Supreme Lord. And then there's the highest category, the Uttama Adhikaris, who just see everything in relation to the Lord, and they don't make any discrimination between a person who's in devotional life, and meaning they don't make a discrimination between the atheist and the theist. I mean, that is how equal their vision is. But basically, they've seen that every single entity is a part and parcel of God. So we're looking at the Pandavas, and they're reacting. So that's why we're considering what is the view that's generally held by a devotee, depending upon their advancement in devotional life. So on the highest platform, there's not actually a distinction being made, somebody who's functioning in an atheistic way, like hurling insults at Lord Krishna, and a theistic person. Now, these 2 categories of persons being gradated in their advancement on the devotional path, they come to know the Supreme Lord. So this is interesting because, you're getting this contrast of Shishupal, who's showing no understanding of the Supreme Lord whatsoever. So that's why we're looking at this. And this particular knowing of the Supreme Lord, that somebody, whether they fall into the Majjhima Adhikari level or the highest level, the Uttama Adhikari, is described in Mantra 8 of Sri Ishopanishad. And this is the mantra that describes what that knowing of the Supreme Lord looks like. Such a person must know, in fact, factually knows the greatest of all, who is unembodied, omniscient, beyond reproach, without banes, pure and uncontaminated, the self-sufficient philosopher who is awarding everyone's desire since time immemorial. So this is what the knowing is, that persons in the highest level, and even the Madhyama Adhikari being able to see the Lord, they're understanding these particular aspects of the Lord, and particularly the one that he's beyond reproach. And in fact, that he actually is granting the desires of everyone, theist or atheist, since time immemorial. Now, the anger that's been aroused in the sons of Pandu is in response to the insults of Shishupal, which in one case highlights his reproach of Lord Krishna. So, taking into account that here's a group of the Pandavas holding this kind of knowing of Krishna's position and understanding that he's beyond reproach, and here they're actually hearing Shishupal reproaching Lord Krishna. So this is the reproach of Shishupal. Very interesting. This is Shishupal talking, and this is what preceded their angry response of taking up standing up and taking up their weapons. How does one who follows no principles of the social and spiritual orders or of family ethics, who has been excluded from all religious duties, who behaves whimsically, and who has no great qualities, how does such a person deserve to be worshipped? So that was Shishupal's insult to Lord Krishna. So the greatest being beyond reproach, he's reproaching him, basically describing him as a person outside of all social and spiritual orders, outside of religious duties, person who's behaving whimsically, person having no great qualities. That is how the atheistic mentality is viewing Lord Krishna. So superficially, without being in the devotional line, Shishupal could be saying, and this is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur rephrases what he says. So this is what he could be saying if you would put it very simply about Lord Krishna. He's a person who has transgressed Varna, Ashram, and Kula. Kula refers to family dynamics, ethics. So the Uttama Adhikari devotee, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he sees a different meaning in what Shishupal is saying. And so this is, you're contrasting the atheistic view with the theistic view and somebody who's on the highest level, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And this is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur takes the same words of Shishupal, and this is how he's viewing what Shishupal says. And this is what he says. Krishna is the person obtained as a son by Vasudev, who was Varnashram Kula Paha, meaning a strict follower of the standards of Varna, Ashram, and Kula, meaning of family ethics. So you can see, depending upon the knowledge you're carrying, the understanding you have, you're going to view very differently. So Shishupal is viewing the atheistic view, is viewing Krishna as somebody who's not following any Varna, any Ashram, doesn't adhere to family life in the proper way. Kula is the word that is used. And the Uttama Adhikari, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he's hearing the words completely differently. he's just practically put it. This, referring to Krishna, is a person who's come from Vasudev. Vasudev was a follower of Varnashram Kula Paha. He was a strict follower of the standards of Varna, Ashram, and Kula. And this is the son of such a person. That's the Uttama Adhikari's view. Now, the insult of Shishupal coming from someone coming from someone not in the devotional line. And there was one of the texts had these words. I'm going to read the Sanskrit and then give the English because it was Shishupal's words. He says, Sarva Dharma Bahiskrita Svaira. And the translation, these were Shishupal's words about Lord Krishna. He is devoid of all religious behavior and moves independently. So, atheistic view. Uttamadhikari, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, sees the meaning of Shishupal's same words in a completely different way. And this is what he sees. Because Krishna is the supreme controller, he acts independently. He is beyond all the gunas, meaning the material qualities, such as sattva, because his nature is situated in pure transcendental goodness. So it's because of the knowledge of Krishna's actual position, what is being observed externally is actually seen as glorious from the Uttamadhikari's point of view. From the atheist's point of view, just the external is seen. So for Shishupal, it's an insult. He moves independently, the atheist. For Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Uttamadhikari, he's the supreme controller, therefore he's functioning independently. So, and then Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Uttamadhikari view, he takes the conclusion, how can such a person deserve mere ordinary worship? He is deserving of complete surrender by everyone. And what was the atheist view? Why are we disregarding all these important sages? Why is this person who's acting independently, whimsically, not following religious varna and ashram codes being the first person to be worshipped? So the contrast is there. Now, there's a book that was written by a spiritual master. I believe he has left ISKCON, I don't know, but at least isn't occupying the same position. Harikesh Swami, there's a book entitled Varnashram Manifesto. And there's an interesting point he makes in the book where he says that in fact there are three classes of men in this world. The devotees, the demoniac, and the innocent. So three classes really. And by way of definition, the devotees are those who have accepted their constitutional position as servants of the Supreme. And the demoniac are those who are actively working to stamp out consciousness of the Supreme. It's actively taking a position to stamp out consciousness of the Supreme. And then the innocent, they're the ones who form the ranks behind whoever is in charge of this society, the leader. So this means the innocent people, the rank and file, they'll follow the demoniac principles if the leader happens to be of a demoniac mentality. And they'll follow, on the other hand, they'll also follow the path of devotional service if the leader happens to be holding devotional principles. So he argues that the fate of the innocent lies in the hands of the leader in this current age. And the current scenario that we're looking at, where this is taking place of the Pandavas standing up, raising their weapons, Maharaj Yudhisthira had just performed the Rajasuya sacrifice ceremony. And just by virtue of the fact that this particular sacrifice was performed shows that he's a leader devoted to the path of devotion. And this is evidenced by his statement glorifying Lord Krishna. So this is a little bit earlier in this chapter. So we get an understanding of what kind of leader King Yudhisthira is. He says, and this is what he says of Lord Krishna, he creates the means, the activities of the world, and thus by his grace the whole world endeavors for the ideals of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. So a completely broad, incredible view as somebody who's going to be functioning as the preeminent monarch of the whole world, how he categorizes Lord Krishna. Quite extraordinary. He's actually, it's by Krishna's grace that the whole world is endeavoring for those ideals of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. And he's created the means for doing so. So quite wonderful how Maharaj Yudhisthira is categorizing Krishna. Now, um, there's a particular other aspect that highlights how King Yudhisthira is in that line of devotionally inclined leaders. And there's a part where Maharaj Yudhisthira, just having been established as a preeminent leader of the world, there's a whole interaction with the priests. And this is what it says. The priests, as powerful as gods, performed the Rajasuya sacrifice for King Yudhisthira in accordance with the Vedic injunctions, just as the demigods had previously performed it for Varuna. That was the 16th text of this particular chapter. And on the day of extracting soma juice, because that was part of the sacrifice, King Yudhisthira properly and very attentively worshipped the priests and the most exalted personalities in the assembly. So you can see the relation between the Kshatriya king and the Brahmanas of society, the exalted Brahmanas, the priests of society. He actually worshipped them. And that's all taking place in this public arena of this huge sacrifice. So this following of King Yudhisthira on the path of devotional service is expressed in his acknowledgement of Lord Krishna. And this is how he, just to add to how he's viewing Lord Krishna, he's worshipped the priests, and here's further how he's viewing Krishna. All the exalted spiritual, these are his words, all the exalted spiritual masters of the three worlds, together with the inhabitants and rulers of the planets, carry on their heads your command, which is really obtained. So he's understanding Krishna's position, and this is how he's glorifying him. And Srila Prabhupada, he phrases Maharaj Yudhisthira's acknowledgement of Lord Krishna's position and that of himself being on the devotional path. He puts it this way. So these are Srila Prabhupada's words where he's writing about this same kind of glorification that Maharaj Yudhisthira has of Lord Krishna at this Rajasuya sacrifice, which establishes him as a leader that's moving on the devotional path. He says, this is Srila Prabhupada writing, my dear Krishna, this is King Yudhisthira talking, just Srila Prabhupada putting it in the words that he's attributing to Maharaj Yudhisthira. My dear Krishna, O eternal form of bliss and knowledge, all the exalted directors of the affairs of this material world, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and King Indra, are always anxious to receive and carry out orders from you. And whenever they are fortunate enough to receive such orders, they immediately take them and keep them in their hearts. So it's made even more personal Maharaj Yudhisthira's kind of glorification of Lord Krishna through Srila Prabhupada's writing, just understanding that how Maharaj Yudhisthira is expressing it, that actually the orders that come from Krishna are so personal that they're kept in the heart. Very wonderful. Now, there's an interesting, I guess, dictum that comes from Chanakya Pandit. And he's drawing from the Chanakya Rajaniti Shastra. And he gives the following dictum regarding righteous rule. And this is what he says. Rulers are the root of righteousness. Brahmins are the root of penance. Where the learned ones are worshipped, righteousness remains permanent. So you can see how significant it is that King Yudhisthira, at the time of the Rajasuya sacrifice, he worshipped the Brahmanas, the priests. And according to Chanakya Pandit, it means that righteousness is going to be permanently present in his rulership over the world. So now, returning to this point that the sons of Pandu became furious with the insults of Shishupal towards Lord Krishna, demeaning the position of Krishna, also draws attention to the particular qualities that are present in those that are Kshatriyas. And this is evidenced in their rising from their seats with their weapons posed, ready to kill Shishupal. So we've looked a little bit about their internal position on the devotional level. And just in terms of the qualities by which they're performing their external work, this holding their weapons ready to kill Shishupal, it also actually reveals that they're properly situated in their Kshatriya positions, because the qualities that are enumerated by Lord Krishna as being the qualities by which Kshatriyas work are heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership. So they rose to the occasion immediately. And of course, that listing of the qualities of the Kshatriyas comes from Bhagavad Gita 1843. So naturally, too, the path of devotion is one being walked upon by the Pandava brothers, contrary to that of Shishupal, as I was trying to highlight earlier on. And Lord Krishna paints the picture of the characteristics of those engaged in devotional service. So again, how you can identify. And this is how Lord Krishna explains what are the characteristics of those engaged in devotional service. These are his words. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the qualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So that's an explanation or a nice picture painted by Lord Krishna. What are the characteristics of those engaged in devotion? Just taking into account that there's three categories: the devotional, the demoniac, and the innocent. So this is something of the characteristics of those engaged in devotion, according to Lord Krishna from 729 Bhagavad Gita. And Srila Prabhupada paints the contrasting picture of those that are sinful. So that's what we're looking at here. And this is how he describes it: atheistic, foolish, and deceitful. Those are the characteristics of those who are in the demoniac category. They're described as being sinful, foolish, and deceitful. So not honest. And it's very difficult, this is Srila Prabhupada explaining, it's very difficult to transcend this kind of duality of desire and hate, which is what one is caught in if one's in that category of not the atheistic category. There's that hatred and desiring something. So he lays down the criterion that needs to be met to be able to accept devotional service. And this is the problem. Shishupal just could not. So what is that criterion that needs to be met to be able to accept devotional service and gradually rise to this pure knowledge that Krishna is expressing? And this is the criterion. A person needs to have passed his life in practicing the regulative principles of religion. He needs to have acted piously and to have conquered sinful reactions and be able to accept devotional service. And gradually he's able to rise to pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the criterion that it's almost visibly evident in the case of King Shishupal that there's this inability to act piously, even in the present, even with this extraordinary sacrifice just having been performed. His mentality was how he could actually ruin it. So he waited until the end of the sacrifice, and then he hurled these insults at Lord Krishna. And of course, looking at it objectively, the insults were from the atheistic mentality, but the theist views the insult as actually glorification of Krishna, because the theist is carrying knowledge of Krishna. So, yes, Shishupal was not able to meet that criterion. So this is as far as I got in this particular analysis of these two verses. If there's anything to expand the discussion, please feel free.
Hare Krishna. So I'm
very grateful to have such a nice audience this morning. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
there's one important point that you brought in the class, from the perspective of the different advanced devotees. There's a Madhyama and there's a Uttama. And one of the things is that the explanation of the Madhyama is that they can recognize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they have that capacity. But they also make distinctions between the innocent, the devotee, and the demoniac. And then there's the Uttama, who has, sees everyone as a spirit soul. He sees for the absolute perspective. So, so then this is very nice when you contrasted Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comments as from the perspective of the Uttama Adhikari, seeing everything from the absolute perspective. So even insults becomes, they're not insults. They're actually, from the perspective of the absolute, they are glorifications of Krishna. So everything is glorification of Krishna. Everything is spiritual. Everything is connected like that. So they don't see distinction. They see everything from the spiritual perspective. And when we look at the reaction of the Pandavas externalists, and you brought out that, in the class, externally appears that they're making a distinction, and they're not only making a distinction, but actually reacting in the face of that distinction. They see a demon who is insulting, so they're not seeing from the Uttama perspective, they're seeing from a Madhyama perspective, if we put it like that, because they show that they have perfect, as you say, perfect understanding of Krishna. But they're reacting, so they're not reacting from the top position, they're reacting for the middle position. Now we know that Srila Prabhupada explains that the Uttama Adhikari, when he comes into this world and have to interact in the world, then he acts in the position of Madhyama, to be a preacher, to teach, to all that. The Pandavas, they're considered as Nitya Siddha devotees. They're eternally perfected beings. They're eternal associates of the Lord. And so obviously, they're in the topmost position. But the beautiful thing is that they're performing, a lila. And I'm preparing something for the retreat that His Holiness Ramapad Swami is going to have in Gitanagari, that is about taking shelter on the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam as a shelter for devotees in Kali Yuga. And in the little research that I'm doing, there is the obvious difference. I'm going to be speaking about the Brahma Vimohan Lila, the bewildering of Lord Brahma. Now, Lord Brahma is also a perfected being, but then he's Vimohan, he is bewildered. He's acting bewildered. He did something that is covered by some delusion. He became bewildered. The difference is that this word lila, and lila means a divine, the definition of lila is a divine play. And lila only applies to Lord Krishna and Lord Krishna's pure devotees. For the rest of conditioned souls, there's no such a thing as lila. It's just, the struggle for existence in this material world. So these perfected beings, when they're acting in the world, the act is in the category of lila, which means that they performing a devotional act to fulfill the purpose of the Lord. So the Pandavas, they go through all those emotions and all the things, but actually they're performing, they fulfilling the purpose of the Lord. And not to be compared with our reaction of becoming angry at seeing some, we're not coming from the platform of a perfect devotee into acting into the world. But we're coming from, we're trying to elevate ourselves from ignorance into, knowledge. So it's a very important distinction. I just adding because you did mention it in the class, so I wanted to add to that because I'm thinking a lot about it because I'm preparing for this presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for adding that component that highlights the roles of the Pandavas as so intimately connected with Lord Krishna that it falls into the category of a pastime. It means that they're perfectly attuned to the desires of Lord Krishna. So even an action that would appear as a kind of reactive gesture, it's not coming from a place of anger, it's coming from a place of being attuned to Lord Krishna's desire for glorification of himself, for glorification of King Yudhisthira. So it's an interesting point, this. It's not that there's not transcendental anger, however. So it's not on the level as, the contrast has been made with the atheist who's actually caught in that, desiring and hating, because that's a symptom of being in that conditioned state that you brought up, that's, being subject to delusions. In the supremely elevated, purified, liberated kind of stage, there isn't that mundane anger. On a transcendental level, and then also as being perfect in their roles, they're exhibiting actually the characteristics that are appropriate to the role, and hence they have to function in the appropriate manner according to the role that they're occupying as Kshatriyas. So everything is perfectly synchronized, perfectly correct, and perfectly appropriate. But it's just, we're analyzing from, more looking from a distance. And so thank you that you added to that looking from a distance.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mathaji. It was wonderful. I'll congratulate you because in 2 verses, which has only translation, you gave 45-minute class, and nicely analyzed it. Thank you so much. So from this, I actually one thing I was thinking, as you were comparing the viewpoints of Uttamadhikari and also the atheistic viewpoint. I was thinking there is one verse that comes to my mind which says Atmavat Manyate Jagat, which means you see things as per your own consciousness. So I think that also plays into this, right? I mean, Shishupal had a very envious consciousness towards Krishna. So everything Krishna did, even good or bad, he would always see it as bad. Whereas Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has a very pure consciousness. So what I learned from this is, for us at least, because most of us are like in between, neither here neither there. So we need to purify a lot to see like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur sees. Yeah, because right now, when we hear these words, we cannot analyze like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. You know,
Thank you very much. Yes, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we're dealing with our minds and our egos. So, one thing I've been very conscious of recent times, just with doing internal work myself, is that in order to control the mind, often all one has to do is apply the intelligence and make a factual statement that puts everything in perspective, and then the mind is completely subdued. So, in some sense, and naturally the intellect is infused with spiritual understanding because one's drawing from the scriptures, because that's how one's cultivating that spiritual perspective. So I'm personally just observing that just making factual statements brings a lot of things under control internally. So thank you. That certainly the internal um, is going to manifest externally. And in our case, and just tying up with Subal's point, a lot of it is that managing the mind. Because that's where that design hatred is, that is the battleground for us, but for the atheist is, they're just caught in it. They're not questioning it. So, or in fact, they deliberately, perhaps even going with the hatred side, which is what's evidenced in somebody like Shishupal. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this thought came to me because, just like you pointed out, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes his beautiful Uttama Adhikari kind of analysis even of Shishupal's statements, and they're glorifying Krishna. One thing I noticed was that he says something very factual. Krishna is the son of Vasudev. Vasudev is the upholder of Varnashram principles. He is the son of that person. So it's a factual thing. So then it immediately clears a lot of whatever confusion might be there. He's outside of the Varnashram system. Oh, wait a minute. This is the fact. So thank you.
Yeah, and one more point I would like to add. I'm reading the third canto, Kapila Dev's analysis on the material nature. There was one verse there. It says that intelligence is produced out of to the creation. It is produced out of passion, and mind is produced out of goodness. So it is reversed actually. Sorry. So intelligence is produced out of passion, and mind is out of goodness, the material modes. So really, when you work outside, it is the intelligence that is very much influenced by the passionate mode that is coming out. So controlling the mind is one thing, but now you also have to have this association and a constant reading of the Bhagavatam to make sure your intelligence is also kind of aligning with the mind with goodness.
Yes. And that mode of passion is the predominant, what would you say, force that's influencing our mode of being generally as conditioned souls. So, and I'm sure being in the business world, where there's that drive for economic growth, it's natural to utilize the intelligence in that kind of way of, how to make profit in a better way, a bigger way, expand profit. So, indeed, to whichever societal division one falls into, but particularly noting the Vaishya business world, um, that that societal division is like any other societal division that one has to actually base one's or evolve one's spiritual consciousness. So then the outlook is tempered correctly, because you have to temper, as you pointed out, that mode of passion. It has to be sort of managed. So if one is not managing it, and that is what one witnesses, at least in our world in the present time, if it's not managed, then actually there's destruction that's caused. So the profit is made, but alongside the profit is a huge amount of destruction. But if one is functioning, having evolved spiritual consciousness, where one is considering who the world belongs to, who do these resources factually belong to, I'm here as a caretaker of those resources, then as one's making one's profit, one's also going to build in that perhaps the factories one's using aren't actually spewing all their garbage into the rivers, and hence somewhere way down the line in another country or another state, it's killing off or mutilating babies who've been born with limbs distorted because of the profit that was made without taking into account the destructive components. So yes. So thank you. So thank you so much for your participation. I'm so delighted on this auspicious day to have such a wonderful audience. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.